Here are Ian Chappell's thoughts at the end of the Ashes series. England have wrapped up their third innings victory of the series, a 3-1 scoreline, and it's been a comprehensive performance from start to finish.
Certainly has been comprehensive. England have been better in all three disciplines of the game, and markedly better. When you think that England made 4 lots of 500, I think, in the series, Australia only reached 300 3 times, and they did that twice in the second innings. So that gives you an indication how much better at bowling and batting England have been. But then you've got to throw in the fielding, which is also a wide margin once again between the fielding of England, the fielding of Australia. The three victories all being by an innings. There is no other word for it but comprehensive.
We've seen England win over in Australia very rarely. It's only happened 5 times since the bodyline. I mean, where does this rate in amongst the ones that you've seen and all time?
Well, it was pretty comprehensive back in 54-5 with Frank Tyson making a mess of the Australian batting, but it was closer in 86-87. So 70-71, it was tighter then. So I think this would you'd probably have to go back to 54-5 to think of one that is as comprehensive as this victory. It really has been. I think once England bowled Australia out for 98 in Melbourne, I think they just started to go ahead in the psychological stakes, and once you start to get ahead there, it can be a bit of a snowball situation, and really it's been gathering plenty since they bowled them out for 98.
All things are hypothetical, but if this team was to come up against the team that beat them 5-0, the Warnes, McGraths and all that, do you think they'd have had the wherewithal to put up a fight in that series?
They'd have certainly done better. I don't think they would have got beaten 5-0. But it doesn't really matter anyhow. I think more important things are England have talked about being the best team in the world, that being one of their ambitions, which is is a terrific thing to have ambition. Can they do it? Well, the answer to that is they've got the attack to do it. And that's the important thing. I think right now, England's got the best attack in world cricket. They've got, and I think by quite a bit. South Africa really are relying pretty heavily on 2 bowlers. So I think they're well ahead of South Africa. I think they're well ahead of India. If you've got a very good attack, then you can be number one. So now I think you might have thought it was a bit pie in the sky coming into this Ashes series for England to be talking about being number one in the world. Now I think you've got to look at it and take that ambition very seriously.
David Saker obviously has been integral to their performances. He's signed for another 3 years, which will take him through another 2 Ashes series. I mean, how valuable has his input been to teaching the bowlers the skills necessary to win over here?
Well, I'm a great believer that you learn to play the game of cricket, whether it be batting, bowling or fielding. You learn that in your young days. You learn that through from whatever age you start through till about 18. 18 you start to play, if you're going to be an international cricketer, you start to play first class cricket, and then you start to learn the mental side of the game. Up to that point it's a fair bit of it is a physical part, building up a technique. And I've also been a great believer that you don't get very far in this game unless you work things out for yourself. You can get some help, you can get some advice along the way, somebody gives you a clue what you're doing wrong, but you've then got to go away and get in the nets and convince yourself that that is what you need. And it may be that sort of sets you off in a direction and you finish up quite a way from the tip that you've been given, but it's the tip that sets you in that direction. But I'm a believer that the best cricketers are the guys who work things out for themselves. If you've got good backroom staff who are giving you good advice, that's tremendous. But until you get, whether they be bowling coaches, fielding coaches or batting coaches, when they start to make runs, take wickets and take catches, then I'll believe they have a big influence on the game.
And what about Alistair Cook? I mean, he looks like a guy who's got it all sorted out now. He had a tough time here 4 years ago, but he did get that 100 at Perth, which I suppose helped to sow a seed that he could succeed over here. You wouldn't have thought that 766 runs would come this time, though, would he?
Well, he surprised me. When I was looking for weaknesses in this England side, and I said before the series that both teams are flawed. I still think that, but obviously as the series has gone on, England's flaws are minimal, Australia's are major. But I certainly had Cook down as possibly being one of the problem areas for England. And that was not just based on what he'd done against Australia previously, it was also based on what I'd seen against Pakistan in England. So it was recent form that brought me to that conclusion. I can't get over the Alastair Cook, even, forget about the guy who came here 4 years ago. The guy that I saw bat against Pakistan, apart from that one innings where he got the 100, when it looked to me like he sort of said, well, I've just got to go out and play my shots. And he started to look, his feet moved very well. But even that guy, technically he's tightened up enormously. And now I'm starting to understand. I was almost bemused at the fact that he was made captain of the side that went to Bangladesh. I was thinking, well, I think that's a very strange move, because I'm not convinced that he's a certain member of the England team. But now I can see what the England hierarchy had in mind, because he's obviously a very thoughtful cricketer and he's a very strong-minded cricketer, and that's not a bad starting point for a captain.
Another guy who comes to mind when you think of those characteristics, Paul Collingwood. He's played his last Test match. How did you view his career, as given that Australia were possibly the opponents who he really wanted to do well against?
Well, I think in this latter part of his career, he's been fortunate that he's playing in a very good side. If he'd have been playing in the Australian side, he'd have been out midway through the series, because Australia just can't afford to carry a passenger. Collingwood's not a complete passenger because he gives you a lot in the field. He's a very, very good slip fielder, and in fact I think that's probably the best aspect of his cricket, is his fielding. Because he made contributions there, he is quite a useful contributor with the ball. But his batting, he looked to me like a guy who was just batting purely for survival throughout this series. And I don't know whether he'd already made up his mind that he was going to retire, but he looked like a guy who was panicked into playing a desperation shot here in Sydney, and he got out. So I take my hat off to him. That I think he's picked the right time to get out. You can't go out on a better moment, but from a personal point of view, I think he's said, right, I'm going to get out before I get pushed out, and I always think that's a wise thing to do.
And just finally, where do Australia go from here? I mean, this is the first time they've lost 3 innings in a series. It's bleak times. I mean, can you see them getting their act together before the Ashes come around again?
Well, I think I guess there's always, what do they talk about? It's an ill wind that blows nobody any good. And if you're looking for the good in the 3 comprehensive defeats, it is that the defeat has been so comprehensive. I think if there'd only been a small margin between the 2 teams, and if Australia had fought hard and almost got there and just got pipped on the post, then there might have been a temptation to do look for a band-aid solution. But I think with it having been so comprehensive, I'm hopeful that Cricket Australia will look at everything across the board. It's not just a rebuilding process, which is part of it. That's got to happen. But I think there needs to be some restructuring. I'm now not convinced that the thing that has made Australian cricket so strong for 130 odd years, with some blips along the way. But that, pardon me, they've been blips that Australia has recovered from reasonably quickly. I think that system has broken down a bit, and I think that needs to be looked at very closely. The problem with it is that if Cricket Australia were to go out tomorrow and do everything right in fixing up the system, it's probably going to take you 5 years minimum for that to start throwing up benefits. In the meantime, we're going to have to live with the talent that is out there. There's obviously some quite good talent out there, but if we go back to the previous trough, which was the mid-1980s, some very good talent followed there and led to a golden era in Australian cricket. If you were to ask me right now, do I think that sort of talent is available to the selectors? My answer would be categorically no. And that's what leads me to thinking that the system has broken down a little bit. It's not a system that needs a complete overhaul, but it certainly needs some tinkering, and maybe in some areas a bit more than tinkering. But if Australia is going to come back, which it will, because it, historically it has done that, I think it is going to need a bit more than just a rebuilding process as far as the team is concerned. It's going to need some restructuring.